Steyn. Join me as I do interviews with leaders in the field of artificial intelligence from across the world. We speak about the business relevance of artificial intelligence, and we also speak about the future. Is it to be feared or to be embraced? Please subscribe at my website for updates on future interviews. My guest today helps organizations in the field of sustainability, corporate social responsibility, technology, and data privacy. Dr. Dorothea Baur earned a PhD in business ethics. She's the founder of Baur Consulting, and she is a university lecturer on corporate social responsibility and on artificial intelligence and ethics. We spoke about the impact of technology on future generations and the need to create an AI literate future workforce, and on business with a purpose. We discussed the controversial topic of contact tracing in the COVID-19 pandemic and on whether we are giving away our ability to make decisions or whether augmented decision making will be a big part of our future. Welcome. I trust that you will enjoy the conversation and find it informative. So joining us today all the way from Zurich is Dr. Dorothea Baur, and what an interesting resume you have, and we're going to speak about all kinds of things. So Dorothea, thank you for joining us. I often start this call with, we're at a cocktail party and I walk up to you and say, so what do you do for a living? And how would you answer that question?
It's one of the questions I get asked most often, and one of the questions I find most difficult to answer. So I hope that one day I find a good, smart answer to that. So what I do for a living is I'm my own boss, first of all, most importantly. I have my own ethics consultancy based in Zurich. I'm like a one-woman, you could call it niche boutique consultancy focusing on ethics, responsibility and sustainability. So I'm advising companies with a slight focus on the financial sector and the tech sector, also increasingly, on questions surrounding these issues. So it's about ethics, responsibility, sustainability, mostly from like a strategic point of view, helping them to identify their values and to align their ethical values with the business strategy. So just to be clear, when it comes to sustainability, I'm not the one calculating your CO2 emissions because I'm clearly not an engineer. So this is one thing, like my consultancy. And then the other thing is that I'm also lecturing at universities and universities of applied sciences still on corporate social responsibility. This is my origin, but also increasingly on artificial intelligence and ethics. And I think the latter is what brings me here to this talk, I guess. Yeah.
Absolutely, because it's such a important topic, even more so. If I can ask you, how did you get into artificial intelligence? Well, let's start with what was your academic career about, your PhD, and how did you get into the AI space?
Well, I always had a tendency to kind of critically analyze fields. So I started by studying business. And then I took a step back from business administration. I want to critically analyze it, so I did like more political science. And then I gave a very short try in the industry when I graduated a long time ago. But then I thought, like, I need a more like intellectually challenging role. I didn't feel comfortable, so I started my PhD in business ethics. And so this allowed me to keep the subject like business, but to kind of critically reflect on it. So the PhD in business ethics was very theoretical, but one core aspect of business ethics is, of course, corporate social responsibility. Like, what is the responsibility of corporations, like a non-financial responsibility, not just social, it also includes environmental responsibility, of course. So after doing this PhD and doing the standard tour across universities in Europe, desperately trying to get a tenure track position or a tenured position, I eventually realized that like the ivory tower I felt stuck in was not satisfying. And I thought I started with a study on Chiquita bananas. When I first left the ivory tower, I went to banana plantations to check out the real world out there. And I thought, okay, let's leave this academic background behind, or let's leave academia and let's give it a try as a consultant. So starting with bananas, ending up with AI has been a seemingly long way, but it went quite fast, because even if the product differs, ethical questions are often very similar. It's always about accountability, like responsibility, engaging with your stakeholders, transparency, reporting, etc. So there's a common denominator. And AI ethics specifically happened on Twitter, purely Twitter. I didn't have any idea about AI at all. I knew ethics, of course, but I opened a Twitter account about 2.5 years ago, and I was afraid it would be a waste of time, but it opened a whole new intellectual and also business world to me. Somehow there's one tweet that triggered, oh, there's a new subject. And I entered this field, and I went straight into it, and I have become a real nerd, according to my friends in the meantime, and I'm reading all kinds of weird books in their eyes, and it has just so much caught my attention, because it's emerging so rapidly, and there are so many, like, similar challenges to bananas, but also on a totally new scale. So that's what I find really fascinating. There's a great community out there. Yeah.
So why is ethics important in business?
Well, it's because business has been created by people for a reason. So, it's not like following a natural law, growing organically, and it's not just there. We shape the business we are doing. So every society kind of takes a choice. Okay, this is what we want to have rules by market laws. This is what we want to have, subject to governmental legislation. This is where we count on solidarity. So there are different mechanisms. So it's totally up to us where to apply, like capitalism, and where to let other rules guide us. And so business should serve the people in the first line. And business is there to make life better. Now, whose life? And to what extent, and what does better mean at all, financially or like emotionally or socially. But so there are a lot of questions. You cannot take business for granted. You need to shape it. It's that everything that is created by humans is something that we humans carry responsibility for. We don't carry responsibility for earthquakes. They happen. These are natural laws. We carry responsibility to, help people once an earthquake has happened. But with business, it's different. It's a choice we make, and so we need to be held accountable for the choices we make.
That's true. Do you find, and it's maybe a very general question and difficult to answer, I don't know, but does business leaders take it seriously, or do they abide by it for the sake of a tick box or a legal exercise? And I think it depends on the different people you're dealing with, but what's your experience?
I think it's really such a stupid answer. It depends. I think values change. They vary across industries. They vary across generations. They vary, across the globe. But I think, especially more recently, like the new business leaders, the younger generation, and I mean younger than I am, I'm talking about millennials, etc., they cannot afford to ignore ethical questions. So, for example, all the sustainability questions, they simply cannot afford to just do like lip service and check boxes, because it's not even an ethical question anymore to be sustainable. It's a business case about being sustainable. And also from the social side, there is much more pressure and expectations from stakeholders, like employees want to be treated fairly, customers want to have a brand that represents their values, and that they know where their products are coming from, how they have been produced, etc. So I think even if a business leader is not intrinsically motivated to be the ethical hero, external pressures have arisen massively. At least I'm talking about the Western world, which I know best, and it's also different types of personality that enter the stage, I feel. And I hope. I'm always often talking from a point of hope.
As one should. Why would you say it's these topics are more important now than maybe for our parents or their parents? Is it just because they didn't have a choice? You just had to be too glad to have a job post the recession of the 1930s or so? But what causes us to be more interested and take it more seriously now, do you think?
I think that on one hand, globalization has made business much more powerful, you know, without entire companies basically almost ruling the world. Companies have gained so much power, and power means responsibility. So whereas before with our parents, their lives might have been dominated, I'm not saying dictated, but, you know, guided mostly by maybe the state and then maybe the community and religion, whatever. Nowadays, business has a much more influential role on our lives. So I think it's globalization, and then of course the access to information. There's much more transparency about what is going on. So raising the whole awareness. So all of that has contributed to much higher standards that we have towards business. But it's not only on the good side. I mean, globalization has also meant that, you know, you have sweatshops in Southeast Asia, etc. So we're exploiting other parts of the country here in the West for our own sake. But so this has really stimulated global debate, and yeah, we are also not as busy with fighting for our mere survival in like wealthy societies. So this gives us also capacity to care about those who work for us in the background.
Yeah, I sometimes think if we speak about Maslow's triangle, for instance, is we've been able to, especially in the first world, been able to climb higher, so we can move down, and it's now about self-actualization. We want work-life balance. We think differently, but I think in years gone by, people were just too glad to have a job and not to starve, so they did not have the luxury to think about these things in the way that a lot of us can do today.
Yeah. It's interesting that there is this correlation. I mean, there's a lot of research on how the GDP correlates to levels of happiness in societies. And so at the bottom, as long as material or basic needs are not fulfilled, happiness levels are very low. And then of course it increases, and there seems to be like a linear correlation, like the higher the GDP, the higher the level of happiness. And then you enter what they call the post-materialist societies, where happiness doesn't increase anymore substantively with an increase in GDP. Yes. And I think that's where, like, for example, in Switzerland, we clearly are there. So it's not about raising the GDP, it's not about economic growth anymore. Like, other questions matter, because we're not fighting for our basic needs anymore, and so our happiness doesn't depend anymore whether we have food on our tables because we take it for granted. It depends on whether we find meaning in life, and so that kind of is the post-materialist society that we here live in.
And we live in a world that's still so very unequal, even here in South Africa. If you have a semi-decent job, you can live in this post-materialist kind of way, if you will. But most people that you see on the street and most people in this country are barely getting by, and especially now, we recently heard that since the start of the pandemic, we've had 3 million job losses. And these are often unskilled people, so it's not just the fact of just go and get another job. So, and that brings me to why I'm so passionate about artificial intelligence and these kind of technologies, because yes, it can make us do work better, do work quicker, make more money, especially if you think from a banking financial services point of view. But it must be able to make life better for people on Earth as well. Talk about corporate social responsibility. A lot of people are speaking about business for good. And I think that's how can we now? We're on this cusp of this amazing technology. I think we're still just scratching the surface of where it can go for good or for bad. How can we use this technology into the future to make sure other people benefit and not just the rich?
I think it's a really important question. This like hashtag AI for good is trending quite heavily on Twitter, but it's also criticized as a euphemism. So I mean, people have very different opinions on that. But I think there are some areas where AI is almost intrinsically good, if I may say so. It's a bit daring. But so, for example, when it comes to sustainability, because there you can apply AI to kind of monitor the environment, to make energy efficiency gains, etc. And you don't have all these uncomfortable ethical issues that you have with humans, that like nature doesn't feel like its privacy is violated if you monitor it. So there, you know, so AI can definitely help us make progress with sustainability, but we need not fall prey to the illusion of like technological solutionism. I'm not saying like everything can be resolved by technology. We also need to adjust our lifestyles. And then the other thing is in AI, it's like essence is its scalability. So once you have like an AI, it can be applied to massive amounts of data, etc. So people talk about democratizing AI, which means making it accessible to everyone or making it like applicable everywhere. And even though I hate the word democracy in that context, because for me it doesn't have to do anything with democracy, it's a political term for me, I think it shows something that so for example, when it comes to medicine, AI can really make like diagnostics much cheaper. For example, not everyone can afford to see a radiologist and have their body scanned and have a radiologist take his time to analyze it. So, I mean, there are a lot of reservations about the accuracy of AI in radiology, but there is a tendency, of course, that AI can scan images much faster and with a relatively high degree of accuracy. So in those cases, in medicine, like in healthcare, I think, but also all kinds of convenience-related activities like shopping, etc. Even though I wouldn't call those AI for good, to be honest. Should take that back. So yeah, there is this huge potential for AI for good. It's just that I think every product that is developed, and that it also leads me back to what I said at the beginning about business, you always need to ask about the purpose. Why am I doing this? What is the purpose of this exercise? So if you start building an AI for an illegitimate purpose, like let's say pure surveillance capitalism, like surveying your employees in their home office, analyzing their emotions, etc., to see whether they're happily smiling along as they do the accounting, that's for me it's an illegitimate reason, and there will never be AI for good based on such a purpose. But if you say like, okay, what is the contribution we can make to this world? And if you also keep in mind, for example, the slogan from the Sustainable Development Goals, which says, leave no one behind. Like, what can we do with AI to contribute to that? And for example, AI in healthcare is a prime example for me for where it could be used to leave no one behind. It can be, it's so scalable, can be applied.
Absolutely. I think with every new technology, that the possibility of doing good or doing evil is always there. I think AI just really raises the bar, because the amount of evil we can do is immense. If you think of what you've mentioned, privacy, for instance, the weaponization, which is already a reality. But the good that we could do is amazing. So my son is 6 years old. When he is an adult, or when he has children, what kind of world do you think he's going to live in, given this technology and given the topics we're speaking about?
Well, let's say 20 or 25 years from now, AI will be ingrained everywhere. I mean, it is already ingrained everywhere. We're just not that aware of it, but it will be even more widespread. But hopefully he will also live in a world where he is literate about AI, where he knows where it is being used and where he knows how it affects his life, where he can use it on his own will for good, and where he's not like just subject to it without knowing. So I hope he will live in a world of choices when it comes to AI, and also of access to transparency, and also of access to remedy if need be. So if your son in 25 years from now, which say 2045, applies for a mortgage and he gets rejected, and it doesn't make sense to him because he thinks he has all the parameters, he checks all the boxes, that hopefully he will have a right to know why he has been rejected. And it's not that he will be dictated by some dark forces that he doesn't know how, why decisions are made that affect his life.
Yes. I had an interesting conversation with a guest last week, about the fact that I use Facebook. I'm very private on Facebook. I've got very few friends there because they are really actually my friends, and they scattered all over the world. So, but we post so many pictures about our children and how they're growing up, and I love it. It's a way of keeping in touch. But this guest said, what if our children had a choice about us creating this digital footprint about them this young already, which is an ethical issue. I don't know if you've got any views on that.
I know there's a huge discussion about that, mostly also when it comes to like social media influencers that are not like you, those that like, really want to show their children, and, it is a problem. But on the other hand, I think their parents have always taken decisions for their children. That's like what parents do. And children cannot take all the decisions for themselves because they're not mature yet. So of course you need to take all your decisions with your child in mind. But I don't know whether this is so vastly different from, other decisions. It's just part of raising a child. Of course, you could say it has long-lasting consequences, and, a child might be embarrassed if they are a teenager and they see that parents have posted pictures of them on the beach just playing in the sand, and you probably should have these discussions with your child as soon as it is able to understand you. But it just shows what's so specific about technology as opposed to bananas. Bananas, they grow, they're harvested, they're shaped, you eat them, and that's it. And of course there's a lot of work involved, a lot of issues. It's just that there's not this immediacy of technology. So what you do nowadays based on technological platforms can have a long-lasting consequence for the future. And that's what kind of increases complexity of responsibility in the technological context. It's not like just you do it now and then it's gone. It's, as you said, a digital footprint, not just now in space, but also kind of temporarily. We leave traces, and we lose control over our own traces already. I mean, what do I know? I mean, of course, I Google myself once in a while. There might be so much information out there, and of course, it's compounded when you impose those decisions on someone else, like your child, who doesn't have a say in it yet.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the work that you do in your consulting firm. What are the reasons that businesses will contact you? What is the problem that they come to you with?
I've had really nice experience recently. I was invited. It was in the financial sector. It was about sustainable investment. I'm not a finance person. I'm not going to tell you return on investment for carbon-free fund. I'm not going to calculate that for you. But so I applied, or I was invited to submit an offer, and then I got the job, and they say, why we want you? We want you because you're not afraid of controversies, and you're cheeky in a good way. And so, because these questions, they're never comfortable. No one likes dealing with them, maybe except for me. I thrive on them. And so, because, people need to open up about their values, whether it is in a pension fund that says, oh, should we still invest into X or Y? It's not an empirical question where you can just, oh, these are the facts and now it's clear what we have to do. All these questions force people to open up about their convictions in context where maybe you're not that used to talk about your personal convictions. So, and so they need a translator between the business world, which is seemingly neutral and purely guided by facts and numbers, and the values that are actually inherently guiding their business decisions. And that's why they hire me, or that's what they say, because I'm also, I'm not afraid to kind of provoke people in a nice way. And
what are, if you are comfortable to answer this, what are some of the most difficult ethical issues that you have found in dealing with some of your customers?
I found that, I've felt sorry for some customers, because I feel like oftentimes, of course, the businesses that hire me, they kind of want to do good. I mean, the really evil businesses will never hire me, so I have a bias here, admittedly. But it's not necessarily an ethical issue, but I feel sorry for businesses who really try to do good, and they're kind of stuck in a market or in an image that makes it impossible for them to gain credibility. And it's, sometimes, of course, we always talk about greenwashing. That's like the big term, like businesses pretending to be green without really doing anything. But the other thing also exists, that businesses are really trying to do, or are doing good, but they just don't get the recognition, and then they become frustrated. So that's something that I wouldn't have anticipated when I left academia. I was more like, in academia, it was my job to be very critical and to be a priori kind of not anti-corporate, but it was more like, I'm the critical academic. So then you enter the real world and you see, there are a lot of people really want to do good and they make an effort, but it's so complex. That's why I like the banana example. Such a seemingly simple product, the most simple product you can imagine. It's not even processed or anything. But even there, having control over your supply chain is sometimes really difficult. And you can, try as hard as you want. Not everything kind of works out the way you want. And so then applying this to AI, where you have like the product in itself, like when it comes to deep learning, is a black box. It is a black box, So how can you then, if you cannot even have transparency in the banana business, how can you have transparency in AI?
Of course. This one is going to be an interesting question, because I don't think any of us know, but what do you think will be the ethical issues we will deal with in the future when it comes to AI? So it could be bioengineering, genetical re-engineering, or many other things. It could be more in a corporate sense. What do you think are we going to deal with in the years to come?
I think ethical issues will be heavily related to surveillance, privacy, which is essentially risking to deprive us of our freedom. The right not to be seen, and or the right to be seen correctly. And so all this, the whole intransparency is what bothers me most, but maybe that's because I have my ethical roots in, enlightenment philosophy, and enlightenment is like the core of transparency, like close linked to transparency. So I think the ethical issues will be mostly about keeping our ability to choose for ourselves, and not to be basically chosen upon, if you can say so, by automated decision making. Because it has been quite an achievement for us to free ourselves from authorities, be it like dictatorships in many parts of the world, or be it from religious dogmas. And then we have gained the ability to make our own decision and to think for ourselves. And one of my biggest concerns on a meta level is, are we losing this ability? Or are we just giving it away to machines? They're supposed to make our lives better, but at what price? If we cannot reenact their decisions, if we cannot understand why they decide the way they do. So that's like the meta level. But also, of course, the more sci-fi part, like bioengineering, and also maybe, when it comes to prenatal diagnostics, like how do we interfere with the human DNA, etc. This could also be compounded by AI. But I don't know, those are those specific technological progresses are still a bit far away. They're happening. But I'm always very reluctant to go into these discussions about, artificial general intelligence or singularity, etc. I don't know. Just try to keep away from these discussions, but I need to have them, of course. So, my key concern is: can we manage to use AI for good and AI as a liberation, or will AI lead to oppression? To put it a bit dramatically.
Yeah, no, and it's such relevant issues. I'm a big fan of George Orwell's work from the early 19th century, and Big Brother and the Thought Police and those things. Even though I'm an optimist about this technology, when we talk about these things, because one of the things he wrote is, he said, when we watch our TV, will our TV be watching back? Which has been happening for many years, So I do think there are some real concerns that we need to be careful about. I also think there's such beautiful potential for our children and their children. So these are important things, and I think we need to have these conversations. We need to work together and figure it out constantly. Last question, maybe, Dorothea. In this world of COVID-19, there's there's been some interesting technological advances, which every crisis normally results in better technology. But things like contact tracing and all that, for me, I understand why we need to do it, but it seems like a police state to me now if we do that. So, and again, what do we do? If I was the president or the prime minister, which option would I choose? It's a difficult one, but any maybe final thoughts on currently what we're facing?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite topics. I just gave an interview on that. Again, I was also on TV here on these matters. And I think I'm a bit untypical. Maybe I'm naive, maybe I'm biased because I'm in Switzerland where everything is, kind of safe, and we don't have this huge surveillance state problem. But for me, contact tracing is like one of the prime examples where AI could be used for good, or technology could be used for good. Because for me, contact tracing, I know that the debate centers on privacy issues, but for me, it's mainly a tool that could help us regain our freedom if we use it responsibly.
Yes.
Because if we don't use digital contact tracing, we will lose control. I mean, it's much easier to lose control over the pandemic even more than we already do. And so if we use it responsibly, the technology, and if we achieve the trust that we need among users and the authorities, then it has huge potential to get us out of this mess. It's just so unusual that this is, we always think about our own private freedom, and privacy is often used as an individualistic concern. But here it is something that we should consider as a solidarity challenge. So it's like vaccines, I get vaccines maybe not for the sake of myself, for my own sake, because I might not suffer from measles, but I get a vaccination to protect others. And the same with the digital contact tracing. But I understand that there are different technologies, and, it needs to be decentralized, and there are all the different, governments and levels of trust vary across the globe. So this is a highly idealized version I talk about, but the epitome of digital contact tracing should be that I hope it will become I know it won't be true, but it could become like a prime example of a responsible use of technology for good, that is liberating and not oppressive, that is allowing us to go about our ways again, and to kind of be accountable, not as an individual, but as a data point, basically, to our fellow humans. So, but I'm aware, I might be a bit of a dreamer here, but I think it has the potential.
Yes. Lucas, I'm so passionate about all the topics we're speaking about today. Because I'm not a techie, so I love the technology, but it's about what's it going to do, which is my importance. And that's also why I reached out to you when I noticed the work that you're doing on LinkedIn.
Okay.
There's so many things, so I'd love to unpack more of these issues in the weeks to come, if you have time. I will post this video with the various links of your business and your social media, Dorothea, but important work that you're doing. I want to encourage you, keep on doing it, because we all need people like you to help our future children. So thank you so very much, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Thanks, John.